Hi gang, it's Jonathan at the Piano Lesson. We're back this week with another exciting episode. I'm going to be flitting about, talking about various subjects today. It's been quite a week, and I thought I would just share all of the kind of real world happenings as opposed to a formal lesson, although, pardon me, it will lead to that. Where we will talk about the mystic chord. What is the mystic chord? Well, it was a chord that was associated with the writing of the great composer Scriabin, who died, I believe, around 1915, and was into mysticism. And the chord sounds like this. It sounds like this. Ooh, mystic. That's the mystic chord. Stay tuned for more about the mystic chord. How did I find out about the mystic chord? Well, like many of you, I went down the YouTube rabbit hole listening to a lot of videos and interviews. One of the most fascinating people in all of music was the great clarinetist and band leader, musician Artie Shaw. And there are a lot of excellent interviews with Artie Shaw. Artie Shaw is no longer with us. I don't remember exactly when he died. I'm pretty sure it was after 1990, but I could be wrong. You know what? Let's just look it up. When did Artie Shaw pass away? It looks like, wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He was born in 1910, my goodness, and died in 2004. So I think of all the people that you could listen to about life and music and philosophy, Artie Shaw is at the top of the list, if not the top. He's just so forthright and straight and sensible. And here's someone who was at the top of his field, just a mega star, playing clarinet and selling, tens of millions of records, and quit. And he quit for a simple reason. He hated doing the same thing over and over and over again. It was oppressive. And he would have to play the same shows back in the day, 7 days a week, 5 shows a night, every day, same tune. And if you changed a tune, they would yell at him. So he got sick of that. He just went nuts, I think. And he really wanted to write. He loved writing as much as music, and he wrote a lot of books. But I spent a lot of hours listening to his interviews, and over the course of the interview, he kind of blurted out this mystic chord thing, this Scriabin thing. And I didn't know. I've never heard of a mystic chord. What is a mystic chord? Please tell me. And so I went. Let me just show you. Well, I won't keep you in suspense. Okay. So I'm gonna write it out. I'm gonna write it out for you. And there we go. So our mystic chord, you have C, F sharp, B flat, and then what was the next one? Then E, E, A, and D. Look at that. So that's our mystic chord. Our mystic chord, and say it's made famous by Scriabin, who was a Russian composer. Hope I spelled that right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's not too hard to spell. Notice though, here's a tritone, right? And here is a tritone, right? And there's different ways to understand this chord. Or if you play it an octave lower, so here's your tritone here, and here's your tritone here, right? And the rest are fourths. These are all. That's a perfect fourth, and down here we also have a perfect fourth, And over here, we also have, well, actually this, there's your stacked fourths right there. There's your chordal harmony. And then F sharp up to B flat. What would that be? F sharp up to B flat. Well, that would be a, if this were F sharp up to B natural, well, that would be a perfect fourth. And then if you take any perfect interval and you lower it a half step, it becomes a diminished interval. So this is a diminished fourth. And that's important. You know, we can't just spell it any old way. You can't just spell this G flat, and you can't just spell this A sharp. Although, you know, yes, they are the same note on the piano. But that's the chord. Now, I want you to notice something really interesting about this chord. You can look at it as if there are two chords that share the B flat, let's say. So we have this chord, the lower part, and there's our tritone, and then we have the upper part, and then that shares, they both share the B flat. The word in music is conjunct. So that's kind of like a conjunct relationship with the chord, and then we have this extra D on top. Now, they call this an artificial chord because they say it doesn't conform to regular music theory, but hey, you know, if I saw that chord in jazz, to me, that's basically, it's basically C13 with, you know, if you have the F sharp there, well, however you want to categorize it, you know, if you put that note up here, you know, well then it would sound different. You know, someone might call it a sharp 11. I dropped my cap on the floor. I don't know what I did with it. I'll get that later, I guess. I dropped the cap to my marker. But that, I mean, to me, this basic chord right here, right there, that is the meat and potatoes chord for any jazz musician. If I see C7, I mean, that's what I'm going to play, probably. And rather than playing the D up here, I'm probably going to play the D down there. So that's the ninth, okay? And you could call this, I mean, literally, right, it's an augmented fourth from C to F sharp, but, you know, in polite company, we might call it a flatted fifth, you know, maybe, right? But that sound, that is, to me, that is the jazz, that's the jazz sound right there. Out of classical music, that came, you know, Scriabin lived, again, was it 1870s he was born, and, you know, and that extra note, that really adds a lot. If you don't have it, see, that's very brighter, it's sunnier, but if you play this, that's serious. That's almost like, to me, that's like music from the 1920s. What if I took that and I put it up here? You know, it's different, isn't it? And if I took the D and put it down here, let's see what it. Let me just do that. That's different too, right? I have the A there. I have the. That's different. So when you have this down here, when you have the F sharp down there. What does that imply? What scale does it imply? Well, to me, it implies the whole tone scale. I mean, that's kind of what it implies. But then it sort of, maybe it's something kind of different up here. I don't know. When you have this here, that isn't in the chord, so that would make it something different. So something else happens up here. This is where we can kind of utilize our knowledge of tetrachords possibly, and, you know, see the upper portion of the chord potentially as something different. You know, maybe this minor tetrachord here. And then, you know, there was the D. It has that kind of Dorian sound, or more like Mixolydian. That's a kind of a Mixolydian, D-Mixolydian scale. The same notes as G major, but starting on D. So I use my knowledge of tetrachords to. I'm just rooting around here looking for the cap on my marker. Use our knowledge of tetrachords to get a kind of wrap our heads around this stuff, you know. So I'm just gonna set that marker aside so I don't mark myself up. But that's my little musical adventure for this week, just from listening to the Artie Shaw interviews. So anyway, I kind of started late in the evening today. I normally do my videos earlier, and because I had some technical problems, Francesco was mentioning that he heard some crackling sounds, some distortion, which I heard too. Actually, I have a student I teach. The internet's amazing. I have a student I teach in Spain, in Madrid, that I've been teaching for many years, and we had some audio problems. And I've been trying different things and trying to, you know, nail down what the problem is. I initially thought it was my mixing console. By the way, I love audio equipment, as I'm sure many of you do too. This was the mixer. This is the mixer I've been using. This is an older. It's actually pretty heavy. It's an older Soundcraft mixing console, and I got this in This is 30 years old or something. It's over 30 years old. I got this in the 90s, early 90s, when we used to use the word multimedia. Remember that, multimedia? I got a lot of dust on it. The great thing about this mixing console, I have two of them. So I took my other one that I hardly ever use and I swapped it out. The problem didn't go away. I finally nailed the problem down to my audio interface. And I have a really nice, what I think is a very nice older audio interface made by Aphex. Here's my Aphex audio interface. It's also pretty heavy. The reason people didn't like these and buy them is because they didn't have a monitoring feature on them. But hey, Aphex is an incredible company, and this, it's a stereo channel strip. It has optical compressors in it, great connectivity, headphone, digital ins and outs, terrific. Well, I think there's something going haywire in here, where I'm getting distortion, because I initially had distortion in a microphone, and then I switched the microphone, and I still had the distortion, and then the distortion kind of moved, and it moved to the piano, and I was like, well, what's that? So that's weird. And so I got broke out my really good analog to digital converter made by MyTech. Let me see if I can just show you. I'll just see if I can move it without breaking it. And I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can. Nah, I'm not going to do it. Sorry, guys. But if you Google Brooklyn ADC, you can't buy them anymore. Something happened to the company, and it kind of blew up. I don't know. It still exists, but I don't really know what the status is precisely. I'm sure someone out there does. But the Brooklyn ADC, that was the converter that, really top name mastering houses were using. It wasn't horribly expensive. I think I got it for a couple $1,000s. I don't know if you can buy them now. It's kind of overkill. I was just using it for live performances, but I needed something to do this with. So you'll let me know if you think it sounds any better or worse or different. I hope it sounds good. It was kind of a pain to set up, though, because I had to download a driver to use it with Windows, and I didn't install the driver properly, so OBS wasn't recognizing it properly, and so I finally figured out how to install the driver properly, and it worked. Hooray! And I'm not really sure what, if any, other interface I might get. I might get another interface. Maybe you have some opinions about that. There's so many videos on that. I really only use 3 microphones. I have one for my voice and my lavalier mic. It's an Audio-Technica mic. What is it? It's the it's the AT8537. I'm not even sure if they make it anymore, but it's omnidirectional mic. good to use an omnidirectional mic, because if it's a cardioid and you move your head, you're going to lose your voice. But I just really have a mic, and then I have two mics on my piano inside, kind of buried inside my big old upright. And I have those hard panned right now. So you should be able to hear, like if you're listening in stereo, you should be able to hear the bass on one side and the treble on the other, hopefully, and here's the middle. And I have those going through my mixer. I actually have a very nice older mixing console. I have a Soundcraft Delta 200, which has really great reputation, and it's been modified, extensively modified, by a guy in California named Jim Williams, who is a pretty well known, has been for many years in the industry. But it's just too unwieldy. It's not really practical to use. So I've been looking at interfaces that might have 3 inputs, or 4 inputs rather, and I may or may not want to record them on separate tracks. I just think that adds extra work, frankly. I'd just rather just mix it down to 2 tracks right away and be done with it. You can very easily just make a lot of time for yourself, and you go down a big, another rabbit hole. But the nice thing that I like about this console is that you can set the levels of the mics as you should in a recording studio. So, various different mics have different output levels, right? And you want to match them. So you have to do what they call gain staging. And if you do that right, then everything sounds great. It's the whole art of audio is about gain staging. That's really about it. So the mic goes in there, and then you have a trim pot over here. So the trim adjusts the signal coming into the board, and you can set that up. But here's the thing about this little mixer is that you can solo each channel. So if I press this button in, that will solo this channel. It'll exclude everything else. And I also have to press this little one down here in this corner here. That's pretty important. If I didn't, I wouldn't see anything on the meters over here, and I would know that that was wrong. It can get a little confusing. And I had initially thought my mistake, my distortion, was caused by the fact that I might have left one of these little buttons down, because they're very hard to see, especially if it's like this. You just can't really tell if these buttons are up or not. But if you do that, you can set up the gain so that when this fader right here is at 0 dB, I mean, that's kind of what you want. You want your meters to be, right about, right about 0 dB on an analog board. On a digital board, that's something else. But on an analog board, you can even go into the, above 0 dB a little bit, and you can have those peaks if you want, potentially. But you can set that up visually so that you can see and hear how each microphone is set to 0 dB. And then you have the master faders over here. And yeah, you could do that in software. Of course you can, I guess. I've never used a DAW, believe it or not. I use Audacity. I've used Audacity for years. But I just use Audacity just to do really basic audio editing. I'll do normalization and of course I've done cutting and but maybe changing file formats, converting file formats, but nothing too intense, limited or leveling. I've done some leveling. These days now everything's leveled, which is kind of maddening. So I guess if I get a interface, I won't either have it as an option, or I'll just have to use my current mixing console. I'll see. The one that I'm really looking at, after looking at a bunch of them, is Behringer, believe it or not. I'm looking at there's a Behringer that has a 4 and an 8 input, which is quite interesting. And the 4 input is interesting because it actually has a line in and out. So you can have an effects loop, and you can also use external preamps. And then the 8-channel one is 1 rack space. That's pretty nice. They're so cheap. I mean, people say, oh, well, they're so cheap. Well, and they break. Well, if they break, then just buy 3 of them for the price of 1. I don't know. But the other one is SSL. That's right, SSL. SSL seems to be appealing. It seems to be like the right price point. Otherwise, you have to start spending some serious money. I like Audient products. Those seem quite nice. They make a nice 4-input model. So I don't know. I'm not really thrilled with anything that's out there, and there's nothing that really calls my name and says, "Oh, this will be so much fun to use." I don't care for the way a lot of these things are designed, particularly. And the other thing I wanted to share a little bit is I've been having some fun on the weekends playing with my buddy Jay, who is a hobbyist. He's been very into jazz guitar his whole life. He's also a great attorney, entertainment attorney, and I have all these keyboards in storage, so it's nice to kind of pull them out and play them and listen to what they sound like. I will tell you, in all honesty, that maybe the best Fender Rhodes sound I've ever heard on any keyboard and on any sample is contained within a keyboard that Casio made. It's the Casio CDP 100, which is not made anymore. I bought it many years ago for next to nothing. I might have bought it for like, I don't know, $100 or something at Christmas time on sale. And I used to take it on gigs all the time. It just had a great Rhodes sound, and it wasn't that tiny, sparkly, thin sound that you hear all the time. That when the Yamaha DX7 came out back in when did the DX7 come out? In the 80s? Was it in the 80s? I don't remember. I never cared for that sound. It was very thin and glassy. But I used to own 2 73-key Rhodes pianos that I hauled around myself when I was a young man, and I can't believe it. 73 pounds without the cover and the legs. And I don't know how I did it. I carried it, There's a method. You kind of get a belt and you put it through one of the handles, and then you can keep it close to your body. And it's the way that the Egyptians did it, when they built the pyramids. So depending on which era you bought a Fender Rhodes in, some of those models had a really like chunky, kind of rubbery growl to them, as opposed to later on, they kind of got it more bell-like and glassier. And I didn't care for that much because they didn't respond properly when you really dig in like a real piano. And yeah, it's not a real piano, but it behaves in a musical way, and you can get accents, and it has that kind of a thwack sound to it. And well, this CDP 100 really has that quality. It's very warm and round and organic. And also, it had actual 5-pin MIDI in and out on it, which keyboards don't have anymore. So if you do have, even though the keyboard on that one is pretty decent, I mean, it's a weighted keyboard, it's really pretty decent. Certainly no worse than the ones that were on the Rhodes. You could conceivably use it as a master keyboard and MIDI another keyboard that doesn't have a weighted keyboard, or to another keyboard of your preference. But I've been using it with this PV amplifier. I guess we're talking shop today. We're talking, electronics and gear stuff. But my favorite gig amplifier of all the amps that I've ever used is a very humble little PV Basic 60. So it's a bass amp. If you look it up, PV Basic 60, it's just a bass amp, and it's one 12-inch speaker. It's a pretty heavy cabinet, but it's decent size. It's an old school PV cabinet. One channel strip with an amp, and I had that customized out in California by Jim Williams. So it just clean as can be and musical as can be. But I'll show you something very, very, very interesting. If you know how to use an amplifier with this keyboard, you could really get amazing sounds. You can get all different tone colors depending on how you adjust the controls on the amplifier. And I'll kind of show you what I mean. I'll show you what I mean here. So I'll try to draw a photo. One of the interesting things that is on this amplifier, which you see on guitar amplifiers, is kind of a two-stage preamp. So you have a pre and a post fader, and the pre that controls the sound coming into the amplifier, and that you set that basically is your tone. Okay, so you can make it distort or make it really clean or whatever, but depending on where you set it, right, that's going to determine the tone of the amp. The post is just basically just kind of like your volume control. If you think about it, all the controls on the amp are volume. Ostensibly, they're all volume, and then you have two inputs. You have a low and a high input. So you can, depending on the output level of your keyboard, you can, if you have a real Fender Rhodes with a weak preamp, you probably want to put it in the high, versus an electronic keyboard, which you probably want to put it in the low, give you a little more headroom. And you probably want to set, if you're a keyboard player, you probably want to set, if a 0 is here and 10 is here, you probably want to set it somewhere on 5, maybe. Again, what we're talking about is gain staging. And then, so you got your keyboard, you're going in to say your low, then you're setting your preamp. I would probably honestly set it as low as I could possibly go to get it real clean. So, maybe like a I don't know, a 1 or a 2. And then over here on the post, maybe I'd set it to like 5. That's the actual volume control. They don't call it volume control. And then you have a bunch of EQ. And one of the other things that you have also here is you have a button that is it's a brightness control, which is really cool. And then you have your EQ. So you got a low and a mid and a high, and then you got a presence. You got a presence control, which it's kind of like a mid-rangey, upper mid-range. So all of those will affect your sound. And then you also have two other options here. You have an effects. You got an effects loop here, and this is the in. This is the out, and this is the in. Now, as a keyboard player, you could totally bypass this whole preamp section, and you could go right directly into the amp, and it would be clean as a whistle, and you'd control the volume from the keyboard. And actually that's a preferable way to do it as well. So if you mess with those things, you can get an electronic keyboard to sound really organic, because you can add little bits of distortion, and you get that coloration. It's really fun. Also, I'll probably be playing some jazz gigs this summer. We're working on that at Conway's House of Jazz. So I'm going to get going. Take care. Good to hanging with you guys as usual, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.